Thanks for listening to the Lunch and Learn with Dr. Barry, here to help educate, motivate, and put you on the right path to take control of your health through weekly discussions on topics in the medical field, public health arena, and in your community. And now your host, Dr. Barry.
Welcome to another episode of the Lunch and Learn with Dr. Barry. I'm your host, Dr. Barry, Pierre favorite, board certified internist, founder of drbarrypierre.com, as well as the CEO of Pierre Medical Consulting, helping you empower yourself for better health with the #1 podcast for patient advocacy, affirmation, and education. This week, we bring you Dr. Archana Shrestha, who's an emergency room physician, a life coach, best-selling author, and entrepreneur. And more importantly, she is the founder and chief wellness officer at Mighty Mom MD and the co-founder of the widely read Women in White Coats blog. If you guys have caught some of my previous episodes, I've had the opportunity to interview, I think right now going on 4, now about to be 5 authors from this series. And it's an amazing opportunity for women professionals in white coats to really get their thoughts and their words and their emotions and their stories out to the world, right? And I've had a blessed opportunity to be a part of promoting this series out to the masses, and I'm definitely thankful for it. Today we have Dr. Archana. She talks about really her purpose and her goal in starting Women in White Coats. What she actually contributed to the most recent volume 2, the Chronicles of Women in White Coats, and more importantly, what's the future to come with the organization Women in White Coats and herself. So like always, remember to tell a friend, if not 10, to listen to the podcast episode, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, let us know how you feel about today's episode, and you guys have a great and blessed day. Bye. This podcast is sponsored by the Lunch and Learn Community Merchandise Store, living out the motto, empower yourself for better health. At the store, you can get your favorite t-shirts, coffee mugs, even wristbands, and more. For a limited time, you can get 10% off your next purchase using the coupon code EMPOWER10. That's EMPOWER10, EMPOWER 10. Just go to shop.drbarrypr.com to pick up your purchase and get 10% off today. And remember, 50% of your purchases will be donated to the 5-Star Scholarship Foundation, a nonprofit organization for high school students. All right, Lunch and Learn community, you just heard another amazing introduction from a guest who, again, I've had the privilege of being able to interview not 1, not 2, but I believe 4 of her co-authors. I believe it's up to 4 now. I know someone's gonna, don't kill me, anyone, if I miss it, but I think it's up to, I think she's gonna be my 4th or 5th one. But definitely blessed to have Dr. Shrestha on the show. And we're gonna get into her business, because that's what we do here on the Lunch and Learn podcast. But we're going to be talking about the Women in White Coats. We're going to be talking about her book, her contribution to the most recent book, as well as get to some more business on a personal event that she got coming up. So again, Dr. Shrestha, first of all, thank you, right, for taking the time to join us here on the Lunch and Learn community. We very, very appreciative of the time spent here.
Hey, Dr. Barry, thanks so much. I'm really, really excited to be here today and to have the opportunity to talk with you.
So for my, Lunch and Learn listeners who, this is, again, maybe the first time, they're hearing of you, tell us a little bit about yourself, right? Like, they heard the bio, but I got listeners who love skipping the bio and they go right to like the main show. Tell us about yourself. What do you do on a day-to-day basis? And most importantly, because I love to do this for my physicians, is let's talk about your general path in medicine.
Yeah, so I'm a board certified emergency physician, and I have been an attending for 12 years out there practicing in the ER, seeing patients, all different types of patients, from pediatric patients all the way up to geriatrics, so we've definitely had those newborns, and, I've had patients as old as 107. And one of the cool things about emergency medicine is you not only get to see that huge variety of the age, but also the different levels of acuity, so patients who maybe aren't that sick, sometimes patients who might normally go to urgent care type of thing, or might, choose to come to ER, or patients who are very sick and need to go to the ICU. And that was something I really enjoyed about emergency medicine. And that's how I ended up choosing it. Dr. Barry, I was one of those med students who went into med school I had been exposed to medicine quite a bit growing up. My mom is a now retired family physician, but her family practice is like solo private practice for her entire career. And so her family practice was our family business in many ways. I would,
I
my
love that. I
dad,
love it.
yeah, yeah, my dad would go in and help with their billing. And I would, when I became a teenager, would help out, in her office as like the secretary and do some filing. And my brothers would clean the rooms and vacuum and stuff like that. So it was definitely, in many ways, a family business. And I grew up around the business of medicine. However, even though, I went to med school not knowing for sure what field I wanted to do, I kind of thought maybe pediatrics. But then when I got to my peds rotation, there were certain things I really loved about it, but I felt really heartbroken when I would see those really sick kids and that sometimes wouldn't make it. And or who had cancer diagnosis, like that just really broke my heart. And I also didn't like to hear kids crying and screaming from some of the procedures that we have to do. And so but then I kind of just kept an open mind, and I went to all my different rotations. I liked a little bit of everything. I liked a little bit of OBGYN. I liked some of the surgical aspects, like doing some procedures, like minor procedures. I didn't necessarily like being scrubbed into the OR, doing like a 10-hour case or anything like that. But I liked I just really liked a little bit of everything. And then somehow, I don't even know what it was that made me decide that I was going to give. Well, actually, I do remember what it was. I rotated in the pediatric ER for about a week, and that was my first exposure to the ER, and that was actually part of my pediatrics rotation. And I said, "Wow, I like this place. Like this environment just seems like the perfect environment for me." And so then later on, when it came time to doing electives, I said, I got to do a full month rotating in the ER and see how it is. And that was like the perfect thing for me. It was kind of like love. Like I fell in love with it because I was like, just felt like I jived. This was like my vibe. Like the people who worked there were like the right, my fit, my kind of people. And I also am the type of person who likes variety. I have a journalism background, so I kind of like being on the front lines and like where the action is. And so it's like, this is the place for me to be. Like, this is where all the action is happening. This is, to me, I was like, this is like what I imagine medicine being like, and really getting to be there for people during their emergencies that they're experiencing. And I just found it so incredibly exciting. And so that was it. That was how I decided I was going to do emergency medicine. And it certainly wasn't a cakewalk to match into emergency medicine for residency. It can be a very challenging residency. And I actually write about that experience in our first book and some of the obstacles that I had to overcome to actually become an emergency physician.
What I love about that is, especially for our Lunch Learn listeners who sometimes they don't necessarily see, right? They always typically see the end result, right? They just see the internist, the surgeon, but they don't see the thought process that it takes. They don't see the ups, they don't see the downs. And I think the importance of really kind of being able to humanize your physician and see them for all of the stuff they do is so great. So I definitely love, especially as a student, like that moment that just kind of clicked for you and said, oh, you know what? Like, this is it. Like I can't see myself, and I jokingly tell the med students who I rotate with, like, all right, guys, you had about a year and change to kind of decide what you want to do for the rest of your life, right? So if you're not one of those people who, when you were a first year medical student, you're like, oh, I'm going to be the surgeon that like if you're not one of those people, which most of us aren't, you're going to find out within this next 12 months or 13 months, like what you want to do for the rest of your life, and hopefully you're happy doing it. So I definitely love that aspect of care. Now you kind of mentioned it, right? And I definitely don't want to let it pass by, like your journalism background. Like how does having that journalism background, and then what made you say, you know what, maybe medicine, right? Like, because I always have
Yeah, so I had actually always planned to go to med school, and the journalism part was actually kind of veer off the path to med school. And so I had been in one of thes programs that there's students out there, they might know about some of these direct programs where you basically get admitted to med school from high school. It's like kind of like a guaranteed admission. And so at the university I went to, I had, it was like basically like as long as I kept up my GPA and I got a certain score on my MCAT, which was like a pretty high score. It wasn't like a cakewalk kind of score. It was like a pretty good score that you had to get, and you had to keep your GPA up pretty high. And then as long as you met those requirements, then your spot was guaranteed for you in med school. So, I decided that I was going to be a doctor at like 17, when I started applying for these programs. So that was quite young. And then I always kind of in the back of my mind wondered, was I doing it because I wanted to, or was it just because it was like somehow planted in my head that I was going to become a doctor?
Mom, because
from
mom had you around and.
Yeah,
Okay.
mom was
like
kind of
that.
like mentoring me, and so I was like, I kind of had to say, you know what, I got to make sure I'm doing this for the right reasons. Meanwhile, I started writing for the school paper or the university paper, newspaper, and I had always loved writing. And so my brother's girlfriend at the time was also in journalism school. And so I was just all of a sudden fascinated. I was like, oh, this sounds really cool and really interesting. I decided to cover sports. And at my university, they actually had a professional women's tennis tournament. And Serena Williams and Venus Williams came to play. And I got to interview them and watch them play. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is so much fun. And again, like I mentioned, I love this, like the excitement. I love being on the front lines. And then I just decided, you know what, I was just kind of wondering, like, am I doing the right thing? Because I'm really loving this journalism stuff. And so I said, let me go and like, instead of going straight to med school, I'm going to take a year to explore further. And I ended up doing a master's in journalism. And it was a year-long program. They kept my seat for me in med school in case I ever wanted it.
Nice.
So it was kind of a nice opportunity to explore. And when I did do journalism, I absolutely loved it and had a really great time. But then I started thinking, well, I still feel like I want to become a doctor. And can I do both? And then I decided, well, yeah, I can do both. And there's this thing called medical journalism. And, I looked up to people like sort of the OG before Sanjay Gupta was the chief medical correspondent for ABC News, was like Dr. Timothy Johnson. And I had always loved his work.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah. As when I was, growing up, and I always watched him and I was like, oh, wow, that's so cool. There are doctors out there who are doing journalism. And so finally things kind of came full circle for me to really dive deeper into medical journalism when I was in residency. And my residency at George Washington University, they had this really cool part of it where we were supposed to do a mini fellowship. And that just meant that we could focus on anything that we really wanted to within kind of medicine. And they had this whole philosophy of like, to prevent burnout, you should have something else that you're passionate about besides the clinical practice of medicine. And so they really highly encouraged us to use that mini fellowship. And people did things like administrative things, or maybe they liked EMS or ultrasound. But for me, I was like, I'm going to do medical journalism. And so I spent a number of months. I got to rotate up in Boston at ABC News and doing a medical journalism internship. And I got to actually meet Dr. Timothy Johnson and write for their blog and be behind the scenes and see what was going on, in the medical journalism world. So, and then things kind of kept going from there. I actually produced a documentary and
oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Produced a documentary. I kept writing. I've always been blogging over the years. Things kind of took a back seat with that once I had my kids and family. But then in the past 3-4 years, came back to it with Women in White Coats. So it's been quite the journey. But what I think is important is that, sometimes as physicians, we get channeled into one thing and thinking like it's medicine and I got to be all in and there's nothing else. I can't have any other side hobbies or any other side interests that I can develop. But I think that we are multi-talented. Many physicians are multi-talented and have so many interests. And many of us were actually quite talented in other areas before going into medicine. And we kind of let those things die off or be dormant. But I love telling people to reconnect with those things because it's just like you see their face kind of light up,
What I love about that is so funny. I just this year, because I'm a program director for those who may not know. And just this year, I started like a business and medicine lecture series. And one of my lectures was literally focused on like, okay, guys, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? Hospitalist, outpatient medicine, academics. Okay, that's great. Like that's on the left side. Okay,
Now you got that job. Now, what do you actually want to do, right? Like after you have this, right? Like, what are your hobbies? What are your strengths? What do you actually enjoy doing that no one has to pay you for it to do? Like, I want to know what those are, because, and you hit it right on the head. We get into medicine and we go so hard doing medicine that we just totally just like brush off these things, right? Totally brush off the fact that I like writing, I like reading, I like doing, like we just told her, I'm doing medicine, so I'm not even going to pay that any mind. And I love that you were kind of able to do really both at the same time. Like now, even out of residency, you were still writing with the blogging and that's amazing.
Yeah, I've had a number of different blogs over the years. They kind of keep evolving and iterating into what I'm doing. But yeah, I've kept writing overall. I've done some type of media work overall. I was a spokesperson for the American College of Emergency Physicians for 10 years. And so did a lot of like media work. So I was always doing something related to medical journalism. And certainly when my personal life got busy and I became a mom and I had young children, I had to prioritize what was I going to spend my time on. So that's why I say things kind of weren't, and I couldn't spend as much time as I maybe would have liked on medical journalism at that time. But what's interesting, Dr. Berry, is that I've been noticing, I kind of realized this somewhat recently, is that when my kids were born, when I had my first child, like there was an entrepreneur that was born in me. And I started to get into, in addition to writing, I also started to get into building a business, and I've had a number of different businesses over the years. But this business that first started when I had my son, my first son, was actually a t-shirt business, a novelty t-shirt business.
Okay.
I decided
All right.
to
We
design
love that.
t-shirts. Yeah. And it just kind of, but I started to really just fall in love with being an entrepreneur and learning this whole other skill set of things, like marketing and how to, grow a business, how to just spread your message out there. And what I love about entrepreneurship is that it's all about solving problems, really. It's bringing value to the world and solving problems and taking a problem and finding a solution for it that other people could use and that they value. So it's been really a cool journey. And I think that's what's interesting about life. Like we all evolve, and I think that physicians tend to get, like we already mentioned, kind of stuck in one lane. And, but we're always growing, we're always evolving. And that's one of the things with like Women in White Coats is I love connecting with women doctors and you don't have to do medicine this one way. There's so many different ways of doing it. And you could really practice medicine, in any multiple different ways and make it fit for you, make it work for you.
Let's talk about Women in White Coats now. Like, what was there? Obviously, just being in your situation and everything. Like, did you feel like there was this like black hole of a need, like, or was it frustration? Like, what was the origin that said, you know what, like I have to do this because like I just have to. Like, what? Like, I always like to know about the start of the things that tend to take off.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the whole idea, the concept of the book. So what our whole Women in White Coats really started from a book. We wrote a book called The Chronicles of Women in White Coats. It was published back in 2018. It was the brainchild of Dr. Amber Robbins, who's my co-founder for Women in White Coats. But she came up with this idea of, a lot of us women doctors are in these private Facebook groups and we're sharing the real deal, like the ups and downs of what we're going through, the struggles, the successes, And we were like, you know what? Amber had the idea of like, well, why is all this so private? Like, why are we keeping these stories private? Because women who are thinking about going into medicine, they should know the struggles, the ups, the downs, and that It's not always like Grey's Anatomy, like this Hollywood version of being a doctor. There's the real deal here, and they should know that. And so she decided to put the book together, and we were at the book launch and we had this audience of people. We're doing a Q&A and people were just asking us all these questions, and there's like a lot of lay people, our family and friends, so not everybody there who was in medicine. And so they were just like, well, what's this like? And what's that like? We read the book and it's just, there's so many stories, and they're like, well, when is the next book coming out? And what we also realized was that it wasn't just a book, and it just wasn't just a moment in time. This was really the beginning of a movement, and where we really needed to share the stories. And this is also, as kind of, women empowerment is kind of really taking off around the country. And For me on a personal level, I also saw my mom as a doctor, and she struggled a lot, like she was a generation ago, a doctor. And so nowadays there's 50% of med students are women enrolling in med school. But when you look at the number of women physicians out there practicing, all ages, it's about 1/3 are women physicians. And at the time where she was practicing, like, especially when she first started out in practice, or when we were young children, when her kids were young, when we were young, she struggled a lot because there weren't very many women doctors. And I saw her go through a lot of different things, not having much support from the men in the field. In fact, she actually wanted to be an OBGYN, and male OBGYNs would tell her, like, nobody wants to see a female OBGYN. So they discouraged, which is actually quite the opposite, right? Nowadays. And they were like, well, women want to have a male. And she was like, really? Okay, that seems kind of weird. But she just, people discouraged her. And, she would be like in the doctor's lounge, like one of few women there. And meanwhile, she, of course, had her friends, but many of them weren't doctors, and many of them weren't even like working women, So she was very isolated throughout her journey as a physician, as a woman physician. And I saw her kind of internalize that struggle, and it did kind of lead to some chronic medical problems over time. And so that's kind of my personal connection to like why this is so important. Meanwhile, when I'm in med school and I'm out there as an attending even, I'll walk into a room and see a patient, and especially if it's like an older male, he'll be like, "You're the doctor?" And I'll be like, "Yep, I'm the doctor. That's why I'm wearing the white coat, and that's why my badge says physician, on it." Or, there's been times where like I'll go see the patient and come out the room, and then the nurse will come up to me later and said, "Oh, that patient said that they haven't been seen by the doctor yet." I'm like, well, you know what? And I always make it a point to like, the reason I wear my white coat is because I feel like that makes me look more like a doctor. And then I even make it a point to say, I'm Dr. Shrestha. I'll be your doctor here today. I say doctor at least a couple times to them, so that like really sinks in.
Kind of like drives home, like, please, like.
Yeah. And then you'll get, comments about, oh, you're too young to be a doctor. You're too pretty to be a doctor, stuff like that. And it's like, well, you're just like kind of like, okay, well, and then you show them how good you are, and you kind of have to feel like you have to prove yourself.
You have to prove yourself. Wow. Yep.
Yeah. And so, and this is, if you talk to any female physician, you'll hear this story from every single one of them, that they are assumed to be the nurse. And not that they're, we love our nurses, and we absolutely need our nurses. That's not what I'm saying, but it's just like, we want to be recognized for our credentials and all the years that we spend. Many of us spent like a decade, between med school and residency training to become a doctor, board certified physician, and so it was no small feat. Took a lot of work. And so we just started to realize that women doctors, we personally were going through a lot. And, then you get into like starting a family, and then trying to juggle having kids and your career. And that's for me when I started to feel burnout, because I was, basically not taking any time for my own self-care. I was feeling some parental burnout, some career burnout, because I was basically had this second shift. I'd go do a shift in the ER, and then I would come home and do a shift at home, taking care of the kids. And so that was when I first started to feel burnout. And I just realized, we just realized that there's so much going on, that women doctors need so much support in what they're going through. And we hate for them to have done all this training and then just walk away because it's just too much. So our mission is to uplift and empower women doctors, and throughout their life, throughout their career, through the ups and downs, and really just give them the tools that they need to succeed, have a long, fulfilling career in medicine, or practice medicine on their own terms. But we do that in many ways. Like, one is through creating community. That's a big part of what we do, because when we get together,
I was gonna ask, because I saw it started out as a book, but like I want to know like how can people be encompassed into the world of women in white coats?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Dr. Barry. I mean, basically, we've really, we started as a book, and we evolved. We decided to do a blog, because there were so many more stories that needed to be shared, so many more perspectives that needed to be shared, and so many more women doctors who wanted to share their stories. So we said, let's not wait to do another book. Let's just start and get a blog out there. And so we put a blog together, and it did really, really well. People loved the content that we were publishing. They loved the stories that we were sharing. And from there, we just started building a community as well. And then as we built community, of course, comes like, when are we going to get together and meet in person, because it was all an online community. And then we started doing like a retreat, a wellness retreat. And then we would start doing some meetups and in-person retreats. And then now we also have online courses, and, have, like many other people, have been switching more and more to virtual meetings and things like that due to the pandemic. But we've really evolved into a lot of different things. We're even doing some coaching as well to really dig deeper with people, women doctors who really need that additional support to make it through the different things that they're going through, whether it's being a mom in medicine, or maybe they're wanting to figure out how to practice medicine on their own terms in a way that really fits their life and their family's life. And to maybe make, my goal is to hopefully I would love to see medicine be a really family-friendly field, for men and women who have family, but especially for women who tend to carry more the family responsibilities.
It's so fun as a program director. One of the and I kind of mentioned it. I think my IG post that this year alone we have, because we take 6 residents every year, and we match all 6 women, right? Which has definitely been a feat that I've been shooting for. Because when I started as a program director, the ratio was 12-4, right? No, I'm sorry, 12-6, right? Like 12 men, and I was like this doesn't even make sense, because this doesn't even match medical school stuff. Like, so what is happening? What are we doing, or what are we not, portraying, right? That doesn't make us like a viable spot. So to have 6 this year, I'm very ecstatic about. But I always think about, so like, okay, what am I doing? And I have to be very active in my approach, right? Because you can't just really be idle, right? Like, what can I do to make sure that this continues to be a safe environment, right, for women, right, as they go through, part of I'd say some of the toughest part of being a doctor, right, is the training aspect of it. And understanding that, there's, lives are still going to be led once they leave the hospital after shift, right? Like, especially when it comes to family. And I've seen that burden on both ways, where, my male residents, their wife is pregnant. Wouldn't even realize it, because it doesn't change them, right? Like, they're just going through the motions, right? But when obviously my female residents are pregnant, there's appointments they got to get to, and then when the pregnancy comes, there's leave that has to occur. And what do you do for the leave now? Am I now penalized, right, and having to stay extra time on my medical education, right, just because I happen to be a woman? And those are questions that, again, I as a man am never going to be able to relate to. And I can be empathetic and say, like, yes, I understand the problem, but I'm never going to really understand the problems. So I think it is an active approach that you have to do active, right, especially to make medicine a safe environment for women. Because, and again, I don't say as but as I assume that for a lot of women, it hasn't been safe at 100% of the time as it may be for a man.
Yeah. And I really applaud you, Dr. Berry, for, being active in seeking out women to join your program, and being someone who, as a hashtag goes, he for she, standing up for, because women also need men to stand up for them and to advocate for them. And it can't just be women advocating for other women, like we need men to also do that. And really, really applaud you for doing that. It's so important and so valuable. But yeah, I mean, as women, we do go through a lot of different things. I mean, I can remember in my residency program, one of the former residency directors had highly discouraged the women physicians from getting pregnant during residency. And it was kind of like, this, apparently it had been spoken a few times of like, yeah, you shouldn't have kids and that type of thing.
So it wasn't even like an unspoken, not even an unspoken.
Well, that's what I'd heard. I never heard it directly from this attending.
Sure.
I heard through the grapevine. So I don't know. I can't, it could
Right.
just be hearsay, but that's what I heard. But nobody ever said that to me. I wasn't married at the time. I was not wanting to have kids at that time because I was like, I could barely keep myself afloat. I wouldn't be able to handle being pregnant at that time and taking care of a child. However, for some women, it is the time for them, and there's, of course, all the infertility issues that, there have been studies that actually show that women doctors have more infertility problems, like I think it was 1 in 3 of us. And it's even when you account for age, like the fact that we're tending to start having kids later.
Yep.
And so even when you match that, so I don't know, maybe it's stress, maybe it's the environment, who knows what it is, but we already, have infertility issues too on top of that. And so, it's tough. It's tough, but I would love to see more residencies doing things to make it more family friendly, because I do think women doctors are a real asset, and there's a lot of patients out there who want women doctors. And there's been a few studies that have shown how women doctors can have really good outcomes, sometimes better than their male colleagues, for certain things. And so, I think that the more we can do to make it a more family and women friendly, profession, the better,
Did you have any hurdles? Were there any hurdles during the kind of the origination of the idea of women in white coats, and just the thought process, or just trying to get people, other women together? Was there any like steps you had to go through, or was it pretty readily accepted?
Yeah, I mean, I think we had a really good reception to what we're doing, and we always kept things really positive and uplifting, and just collaborative. So I think that we've been really lucky that way, in that people have really loved what we've done, and they really enjoy all the events that we put together and the content we're putting out. We get pretty much nothing but positive feedback on everything that we're doing, because I think people just, especially the women out there who are following us, they just really feel this need for what we're doing and the content we're creating. And, every time we do an event, especially, and we talk about things like burnout, the thing that the feedback we get is like, I didn't know that I felt so alone before I found this community. I felt so alone. I felt like it was this big dark secret of what I was going through, and that nobody could understand, and they just felt so alone in the hurdles that they were facing, the difficulties, the obstacles, and then also oftentimes that leading to burnout, because, women physicians, the most recent Medscape survey, actually published this year, showed that nearly 50% of women doctors are feeling burnout. Whereas for men, it's closer to about 40%. And so, half of us are feeling burnt out, and we're just going around trying to hide it, because we just feel like embarrassed. We feel like we've disappointed others. We feel like we're disappointing the system if we don't practice full time at this, fit in the box, like the cookie cutter way of practicing medicine. If we go down to part time, or if we decide to take a leave of absence, we're kind of like made to feel like we're less than for doing that, and so the main feedback we get is, wow, I finally found a community that gets me and understands what I'm going through, and I don't have to feel alone anymore.
I love it. So talk to us about your recent contribution, because we talk about women in white coats, but you guys just dropped another book, right? Like talk to us about part 2. Talk about your contribution to the book.
Yeah, so the second book has been wonderful. We've Dr. Amber Robbins and I are the only 2 authors from the original book who also are writing for the second book. But in this second book, I write about Superwoman syndrome, and about what it was like for me to grow up with watching my mom, who I basically saw as a superwoman, because she was not only raising me and my brothers. I have 2 older brothers, but she was working private solo practice, and she did a lot of things on her own. And on top of that, she was really engaged in her community, and was like a phenomenal Indian cook as well. My family is from India, and she also dealt with so much, between gender disparity and also some racism, and she dealt with so much, and I watched her deal with that. And when I became a mom, I thought I was supposed to be just like her in many ways, or that I should achieve as much as she had. And I was like, then I realized, I'm like, wait, how did she do all that? Because I certainly am not able to do nearly half of what she's able to do. I can barely keep one area of my life straight, whether it's career or family. It was like to do the both. And I was like, I had this inferiority complex about my cooking. I'm like, I'll never be as good a cook as her, And it was like, well, and then I came to this realization of like, wait, why am I trying to be the superwoman? Like, where did this whole thing come from? Why, like, who said I have to be a superwoman? Like, why can't I just accept who I am and that I'm doing the best I can do? And, where's this ideal of a superwoman coming from? And so I started to just question that in my own journey, like, why am I trying to be a superwoman? Do I even want to be a superwoman? And what are the costs of trying to be a superwoman? And basically, what a superwoman is, like, there's actually a superwoman syndrome is actually kind of a term that psychologists use. And what it is basically giving so much to others and trying to do everything, so not only being a career woman, but also a very present mom, a very engaged mom. So you're trying to like not only do everything with your career, but also everything at home. And you just kind of keep adding and adding and adding to the plate, never taking anything off. Whereas a career woman kind of decides like, I'm going to focus on my career and the home life is going to be someone else's responsibility, or, not so much my focus. But a superwoman tries to do it all. They try to do both things, and what is the cost of that? And so I kind of looked at my mom's life and I was like, well, the cost of it for my mom really was that she ended up with some chronic illnesses, and she, over time, the chronic stress led to some chronic illnesses that she had, like hypertension and some other things, and led to a lot of anxiety for her, and feeling isolated and burnout. That was the cost. That was the price she paid of being a superwoman. And so, as I kind of was initially, when I became a mom, trying to be a superwoman, I started to really think about, is that the way to go? And what do I want my life to look like? And so I consciously made a choice. I'm like, I'm not going to try to be a superwoman. I'm going to ask my husband to help me as much as possible. We're going to get a nanny. We're going to use Amazon Prime. Like, we're going to do all these things, like in small and big ways, just learn to bring help, like involve other people, and not for me to try to do everything on my own, and I just was like, I'm only one person. I can only do so much, And as I mentioned, I kind of was also going through some burnout at that time. And then I started to realize that the self-care was really, really important. And what oftentimes superwomen do is they do everything for everyone else, for their career, for their work, for their family, except themselves. Like they put themselves last, and they basically sacrifice themselves for the sake of everybody else. And that's what I started to realize is that is not sustainable. Like, that is just basically running yourself into the ground. And so basically I decided that's not what I was going to do. I'm not going to try to be a superwoman. I'm going to take time for myself and self-care, and really try to give from the overflow. Sometimes people say you can't give from an empty cup, which is absolutely true, and you should pour from a full cup. But I would say actually you should give from the overflow. Like, fill yourself up so much that you have so much love to give, you have so much energy, so much passion, so much motivation to give to others, that you're giving from the overflow. And I think that's true giving, when you're giving from the overflow, not by depleting yourself. And so that's kind of what I write about in the chapter. And what's been really cool, Dr. Berry, is that so many people have really related to it and can really resonate with that message. Even women who aren't in medicine, just women, especially just working women, working moms, can really relate to the whole perspective on that and take away a lot from that chapter. So it's been a really, it was a really fun chapter to write about, and I think it really resonates with a lot of people.
Now, has Women in White Coats, just the foundation, the origin, just like everything that's kind of been encompassed from it, has it helped you with the burnout? Has it helped you get back to recognize what is self-care for you? Like, has it had a positive effect on yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been such a wonderful time for me to be a part of this, and really just reconnected me to so many things. It got me back writing more. It got me, doing more medical journalism and media work, but also got me to, get the creative juices flowing. Like, I'm a very creative person, and as a co-founder of it, it is also a business, and it got my entrepreneurial side kind of going too. So it's really been so incredibly motivating, and I think that one of the things that's so rewarding is just having a passion, for helping others and making an impact in other people's lives, and bringing that creativity there, bringing the writing, using my entrepreneurial skills as well, and it's really all kind of culminated in so many of the different aspects of my life, between medicine and journalism and my interest in being an entrepreneur. It all kind of culminates with Women in White Coats for me at this time, and so it's really helped me a lot. It's also given me a huge, like, a community. It's helped me just be excited about life. I think that maybe you can relate to, after being out practicing for a number of years, the clinical side, you're like, okay, I got this. After the 1,000th chest pain and abdominal pain you've evaluated, you're like, okay, it's not so intellectually challenging anymore. So I think that, for me, I feel my best when I'm just like growing all the time, like when I keep growing and I keep learning and doing different things. And, I think within medicine, I felt very comfortable, like clinical practice of medicine. I felt very like, I'm good, I'm in my stride with that, but I needed to keep growing in another area. And so Women in White Coats has been that avenue and venue for me. So it's been really amazing.
Now, where did Mighty Mom come from? Like, is that more of extension? Was that there before?
Yeah, so Mighty Mom MD is my personal brand. It's a so I kind of mentioned I've had a number of businesses over the years. So my son is now 10, but when he was under a year old, I started this t-shirt business, and then after a couple of years of that, I was on my, trying to overcome burnout. And what brought me back, as I mentioned, was diving deep into self-care, which meant, eating really well, focusing on my nutrition, and working out regularly. And the other thing that was happening as I was kind of dealing with the mommy stress, career stress, the burnout, et cetera, is that I had gained a bunch of weight and I was wanting to lose it. And so focusing on self-care not only allowed me to lose about 35 pounds, but really got me, feeling better mentally, because I was a super crabby person then. And, just getting into a really negative headspace and mindset. And so working out brought me back, and I had a coach who helped me on my fitness journey, who helped me get into a really great self-care routine. And she was like, you know what? And so what happened was as I lost the weight and people were like, hey, you look happy. Like, what's going on? Like, you just seem like a happier person. And I was like, yeah, I am happier. I've been doing these workouts. I've been following this nutrition plan. It's been amazing. They're like, well, I want to do it too. How do I do it? And so I decided to help them, and I became a coach, focusing on wellness and lifestyle, nutrition, and exercise. So I started coaching, and that's what Mighty Mom MD is, my personal brand for my wellness coaching. And so that was kind of what I was doing as I got involved in the first book of Women in White Coats, The Chronicles of Women in White Coats, which was back in 2018. And so now I kind of do both, but I am spending more time with Women in White Coats of late, because we're just growing so much and we have a lot of momentum. But it's interesting because a lot of the things really align in many ways. And when I was coaching primarily with Mighty Mom MD, many of my clients were in healthcare. Many of them were women physicians or nurses, and just because they could relate to me and I could relate to them and what they were going through, and all those donuts that just show up in the hospital break room. I was like, yeah, I got you. I totally know that. Like the cookies and the donuts and like, I don't know, like you don't even have a chance to eat in the ER, but somehow like donuts and pizza show up,
Right. Like you
And
never see who even brings it in. It just ends up like, okay, all right, we got donuts in here. Like, you look at the table and like, okay, donuts. Okay.
yeah, donuts. And plus you're like, I didn't even eat anything today. Maybe I should have a donut, And so then you start gaining weight. So I can relate to what they were going through. And I was like, yeah, I totally hear you. And here's what I do. Here's my tricks for avoiding the donuts, And so, so it all kind of converged in many ways, because with Women in White Coats, we do definitely talk a lot about wellness. We have a lot of talks about burnout and how to overcome it. And, obviously burnout is multifactorial, and, it can certainly be due to some institutional things that are going on within the hospital or EMR, or, kind of administrative burden that doctors feel. But there's also the self-care side, which I think that we in med school are never taught, that we need to kind of take care of the healer. You can't just keep on giving and giving and never take care of yourself, So in many ways, the two have kind of like converged, and now we're doing some coaching through Women in White Coats too. So in many ways, it's all kind of one thing leads to the other, and you're just kind of evolving and growing. So that's the beautiful part about it.
Love it. So, and speaking of evolving, what's happening next for us, right? Like, what do we have to look? I know I'm asking a lot because I know you just did the book, right? But like, what's next for us? Like, what's on the horizon?
Yeah. So with Women in White Coats, we actually have a virtual summit that we're putting together, and it's called the Women in White Coats Virtual Summit. And the theme of it is called Women Docs Thinking Outside the Box. So, I mean, I kind of referenced that as we've been talking, because I think that, what we're doing basically is featuring 15 plus women doctors who are practicing medicine on their own terms, living life on their own terms. Because, so many of us, especially when we're training, we see doctors who are practicing in one way. And many of us see the academic physicians, right? We're like, oh, I got to be in academics. And, I was like that too. I was like, oh, I got to get an academic job, and I got to become a professor and this, that, and the other thing. And then like, I didn't get an academic job. I was like super disappointed. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do community medicine, and like, it'll be great, and I did community medicine. But then even there, it's like people practice in a certain way. It's like, you got to do full time, or you got to have this really huge practice. And we just start to feel like there's only one way to practice medicine. And what I love about these women doctors who are part of this summit is that they're practicing medicine in so many different ways. And we've got people talking on telemedicine, and an expert who's going to talk about locums tenens, and someone else talking about direct primary care and how to set that up. Also, how to create a med spa or do like a concierge practice. And also just other things like getting into real estate investing or stock investing, and so many different things, because we just realized also lifestyle medicine, that's another huge thing people want to do, or sleep medicine. There's so many different ways to practice medicine, that we don't have to always just follow the traditional model, or many of us now are employed by others, and maybe it's time to like take back your medical degree. And right now with the pandemic, so many people are transitioning and pivoting and realizing like, okay, maybe their job isn't so stable, their employed position isn't quite so stable as they thought.
Oh, yes.
And yeah, so I think that's the huge wake up, I think, call happening for us in medicine, is that I used to even tell my husband, I was like, yeah, healthcare is recession proof, people always need healthcare. And then something like the pandemic happens, and you literally got dermatologists and ENT doctors who have no income. They're like, now I'm living, I've just burned through my savings and now I have nothing. And it's like, whoa, really? It's just kind of a huge wake up call that maybe we all need to have other sources of income besides our regular job or regular position that we have. So we're trying to give women doctors out there all the information that they could possibly want, on a variety of different topics, different ways to practice medicine and make it work for you, especially given the fact that many of us also have family responsibilities, and also just concern about being, sometimes in places where we're seeing COVID patients, maybe some people have family members at home who could be immunocompromised. They don't want to bring that home to their family and that type of thing. So the whole healthcare landscape has really changed now. And so that's why we thought it would be really important to share, what other women doctors are doing and how they're practicing medicine and doing things perhaps different than the traditional way. And so far, we've got a ton of people already signed up, registered for it. It's a free summit. And it's going to be wonderful. I think people will absolutely love it. It's August 31st through September 4th. In case any of your listeners want to check it out, they can just go to our website, womeninwhitecoats.com, and get registered for it.
Oh, perfect. All right. And we'll definitely make sure that is in the show notes. Please, once I'm done, I'm gonna sign up for that because I'm gonna want to listen to. I want to be empowered. Like I said again, I love the aspect of the women empowerment just in general, but especially in medicine, especially in healthcare, because I know there are forces, right, that there's nothing you have done, right, but that continue to, like hold you guys down in a position that you don't need to be in, right? So I'm one for always trying to circumvent those outside forces that have been, historically and traditionally, and even as we speak, right? Like, making sure that you don't really excel to the level that you need to, that you don't get paid at the level that you deserve, right? Like you don't get the time off, you don't get the respect. Like, I could keep going, but like again, so shout out to that for sure. Before I let you go, like how can, like, I know Women in White Coats, so make sure the link is like, how can people find you, follow you, kind of again, be in your world, let them know. Let's give these call to actions out. Let's get people to working.
Yeah. So if you want to check out Women in White Coats, you can find us at womeninwhitecoats.com. We're also on Instagram at Women in White Coats blog. And if you want to check out what I'm doing, you can follow me on Instagram as well at Mighty Mom MD, or you can head on over to my website. It's mightymommd.com.
I love it. Again, thank you for taking the time to get me hyped, right? Like, again, as a father of two, father of three, but two daughters. I just love, seeing just this change and seeing this level of determination that women are like, I'm not going to allow you, right? You being me, men. I'm not going to allow you to allow my gender to be a handicap anymore. Like that's not going to happen. So definitely thank you for, serving as an amazing example, not only for my daughters, not only for my mom, my sister, my cousin. Like, please, thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I really, really appreciate that. This has been such a wonderful conversation. And I do have a daughter as well. And I was just thinking about it today, like how she tells me she wants to be a doctor. And I never told her to do that, but she's seen me and she has seen my mom, she knows we actually have a lot of doctors in our family, but she's seen many of us. She says she wants to be a doctor. And sometimes I'm like, oh, it's a tough time, but then I realized like we have the opportunity to change this. We can change it if we work together. We can make it as family friendly as just the way nursing is so female heavy, right? Like it's so many nurses, like I think it's 90% of nurses are women, so maybe we can make medicine into that too one day where women don't shy away from it because it seems like impossible to do with a family. So, yeah.
Again, thank you for joining, and much appreciative. And again, I wish you nothing but support and nothing but success, really, for everything under that looks like it's going to be a huge umbrella now of Women in White Coats.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. It's been wonderful chatting with you.
Thank you for coming to the end of the episode. It is yours truly, Dr. Barry Pierre. I want to give my undying thanks to you for your support. Just getting to the end of the episode means that you at least enjoyed today's episode. Hope you were empowered by today's episode. Please remember to share this episode with at least 2 people that you know that would be greatly affected if they did not listen to today's episode. And if you have not already done so, subscribe to the podcast. Leave us a 5-star review, especially on Apple Podcasts or wherever you can leave a review. Leave a review there because your support is so valuable for what we're doing here on the Lynch Learn and everything with Pierre Medical Consulting. And if you have not done so, go ahead and join the listserv. To join the listserv is very easy. Just grab your phone right now. I'll pause. join the listserv, you want to text Lunch Learn Pod. This is all going to be one word, Lunch Learn Pod, to 44222, and you'll be on the listserv. You'll know exactly when new episodes are coming out. You'll know about new episodes before they actually come out, because I usually tell my listserv members, hey, this is what I'm working on. These are the guests that you should expect to hear for the week on. Thank you guys. You have a blessed day, and I'm going to see you guys next week.